recognized him from this open house before our first day. He was that extremely blonde surfer-looking kid with a very loud Hawaiian shirt.
The first Brooks classmate I ever met was either Ollie Gorm or Joe Berberian, and I'm sorry to say I can't for the life of me remember who I was introduced to first at Carolina Rosass's freshman open house. Apparently, as she has since informed me, Ritika was there too. The three things I remember from that day are hearing Priyanka's laugh for the first time, the absolutely nauseating orange-brown shirt I wore, and the feeling that everything around me was distinctly different from what I knew. I loved it, and I felt out of place in the pastel-colored vineyard vines wearing suburban atmosphere of North Andover.
Rowan and I had that similar anticipation when arriving at Brooks, but we had arrived at this point in drastically different ways. Let's go back to the beginning of our respective paths so we can see how I met this blonde bombshell. My life was the standard life of a private school kid, forever surrounded by kids trying to fit in too well but still grow up too fast. I lived with my mom, dad, and little brother Thanai in a yellow house on a hill in the ultimate suburb of North Andover, Massachusetts, where soccer moms and large SUVs dominated the streets. My parents were and continue to be incredibly hardworking people, whether it be to provide for the family or to take Thanai and I to our many, many after-school activities. Thanai is my best friend, and I tell him everything. Yes, he is a 14-year-old boy who probably doesn't care about the latest drama in my life, but he pretends to, and actually gives some really good advice when I ask him for it. My family's Hindu, and we did go to temple and do pujas, or prayers, at home, but it wasn't a big part of my life. My life experiences played a much larger role in defining my character.
As a kid, I grew up splitting my time between my mom's house in Temple, New Hampshire, and my dad's house in the adjacent town of Peterborough. The woods. It's the easy way to describe Temple, a town of only 1,300 people deep in rural southern New Hampshire. I grew up in an antique colonial home with creaking floorboards and black shutters that always seemed to need another coat of paint. The blinding whiteness of the house matched the diversity of the town. Our family ran an organic farm from the time when I was 3 to when I was 10. The average day consisted of getting up before the sun, helping milk the goats, collecting chicken eggs. You know, normal stuff. No TV or junk food in Temple. Peterborough, on the other hand, was a lot more mainstream. It's a middle-class town with a predominant population of frou-frou new age, kale-eating, gluten-free, postmodern hippies. I own a Prius, so I'm an environmentalist crowd. It is the epitome of a well-intentioned town, but it taught me at my first lessons about what it means to not be typical in this world at a very young age through my experiences with my brother Forrest. My brother Forrest is a person who experiences trisomy 21 or Down syndrome, and I don't think I noticed there was anything special about my brother until I was 8 or 9 years old. It was around that age that I began to notice he received polite condescension from people when I received earnest conversation. This deeply upset me, and I couldn't understand why they didn't give him the same chances that they gave me. I didn't know the words to communicate my thoughts. That said, the town also gave me many gifts. It was the home of all my rec sports and my connection with the UU church that I love. The Unitarian Universalist Church opened the door to music for me through chorus and was instrumental in developing my core values and beliefs. Most importantly, the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
As a kid, I was not particularly aware of my surroundings. Everything was about Ritika all the time. Still kind of is, okay. Being ignorant of my surroundings directly translated into being ignorant of how my words affected other people. I was notorious for having no filter, and this was painfully obvious in the very structured elementary school I attended. I believed that if I had something to say to someone, they deserved to hear it. At the age of 5, this mindset was as present as ever. It was gym class in kindergarten. My usual teacher was absent, so the technology teacher was our substitute. He wore a 3-piece suit and taught us drills I was certain were more fit for the military. At the end of the class, I placed a hand on my hip and informed him that he was, in fact, the worst teacher ever. I don't think I have ever seen a man turn that red and become that speechless in such a short amount of time. This impulsive behavior stayed with me throughout elementary and middle school, and I was terrified it would show up in high school as well and rob me of my friends.
Growing up a child of divorce dramatically influenced my perspective on the world. I think it forced me to grow up more quickly. For example, I remember very distinctly the day of my 10th birthday feeling overcome with sudden grief at the realization of the fragility of my own mortality. I was no longer a single digit. I was probably going to be a double digit until the day I died. But, despite this horrific realization, I managed to pull myself together by telling myself that it wasn't something I was going to need to worry about for another 7 or so years. Ever since then, I've been an incredibly cautious person when it comes to life and death stuff. I mean, things you might think of as trivial, like buckling a seatbelt or not texting and driving, I've always been super nervous about. But regardless of my preteen midlife crisis, I was undoubtedly a precocious, mischievous imp of a child who enjoyed singing, playing pranks, and of course, basketball. This lighthearted playfulness has proved to be an indispensable gift to my life, as it has helped me cope with realities that are not at all lighthearted. My middle school was different. I went to Pine Hill Waldorf School from 1st through 8th grade. My class and grade only had 20 students, and it seemed as though everyone else's parents were married. I found myself questioning why my family was so different. I was also the only UU in my class, which is not surprising, as I'm one of only 4 here at Brooks, so shout out to Sarah Fleischman, Mrs. Waters, and Mr. McLean. My older brother, Forrest, also joined Pine Hill the same year I did, only 2 grades ahead of me. The focus on the arts at Pine Hill helped me learn how to understand and express myself. We took regular trips to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, but my favorite part by far was the circus arts education. From the 3rd grade up, we learned incredibly valuable skills like unicycling, club juggling and knife juggling, and of course, tight wire. Pine Hill deeply ingrained an appreciation and love of things and people that are not typical.
As you now know, I went to Pike for middle school, a common phrase for many Brooksians. For those of you who don't know, Pike is like Brooks's younger sibling in that it's just as preppy, but the students are a little shorter. I tried to fit in at Pike by standing out. Boy, did I stand out. I did not want to make the same mistakes I made in elementary school, so I changed. My new, over-the-top, make room for no one personality was overwhelming for anyone who knew me. But it was just a mask. My friends at the time interpreted this mask I wore as a sign of my ignorance. My attempts to be funny just ended up in me embarrassing myself, and eventually no one ever took me seriously, even when I really needed them to. As I progressed through middle school, my self-confidence was at an all-time low, and maintaining my mask became an exhausting burden. What I wanted more than anything was for high school to come sooner. I wanted to start over, and I wanted to be myself again. But how could I be myself without hurting others like I did in elementary school? My greatest struggle was finding a balance between being known as fake Ritika and hurtful Ritika.
Coming to Brooks has been really awesome for me. Beyond simply academics, Brooks has easily been the greatest learning experience of my life. When I first got here, I found myself floating without a specific friend group. I tried to change myself to be more like everyone else. I listened to new music, didn't talk about class after school, and didn't talk about social justice issues or anything. It just felt wrong. It didn't help that my roommate, Seon Kim, and I did not speak for the first 2 weeks of school except to ask each other to turn on or turn off the light. So thanks. I felt like the real me did not fit at Brooks. My passion for theater and art split with my love for competition, and I was forced to decide between athletics and theater for the first time in my life. I chose sports. Seon and I were both part of the legendary 2013-2014 third soccer team, so shout out to all you guys out there. It helped break the ice between us. We gradually discovered that we liked the same kinds of music, loved DC and Marvel comics, and of course, Star Wars. Although he was from a totally different part of the world and an entirely foreign culture, Seon became one of my closest friends and one of the few people I could find myself being fully honest with, whether it was debating the likelihood of Mace Windu surviving his fateful fall, or, who was better at Super Smash Bros. Or Gundam Extreme versus Full Boost. But Seon taught me to keep an open mind about friends. And I think that lighthearted playfulness continues to be a big part of who I am. When I look back at all the terrible things that were going on at home, I know that Brooks provided the buffer I needed to hang on to that part of my identity. For instance, my house literally burning down freshman year, the loss of 8 family members over the course of 9 months, including my grandfather to suicide, and my father's mental illness metaphorically burning him up during junior and into senior year. Although we were not close, Anna Trusty's death especially stood out to me. It reminded me that every second of life is a precious gift that can be taken away for seemingly no reason. And it inspired me to be happy with who I am instead of trying to fit into other people's maddeningly confining boxes. I felt like I could finally be the way I was with Seon around other people. Brooks and my fabulous support network of dedicated friends, especially my advisor, Dr. C, provided a buffer without which I would have lost important parts of myself to those tragedies. Brooks has taught me to be comfortable with and embrace who I am.
Brooks was my chance to be Ritika, but the Ritika I wanted to be. I had spent all of middle school acting like someone I wasn't, and elementary school was full of me just trying to figure out why I made someone cry. And I had suffered the consequences. But I was at a new school, surrounded by new people, and I was ready to find what really made me, me. There was more to me than just the impulsive remarks and limitless energy. I had the opportunity to put these seemingly negative qualities to good use. So that's what I did. Little by little, I began joining clubs and classes that stood out to me. I found I had a passion for theater, science, and Latin. Kids I hadn't spoken to before started to recognize me after a stand-up comedy routine I did during winter term freshman year, which Rowan also happened to be in. I even took part in the Wilder speaking competition, which I managed to lose 3 times. The losses aside, participating in the Wilder was my ultimate obstacle. Being a freshman giving a speech that I wrote myself in front of 6-foot-tall bearded senior boys was terrifying. But I'm so glad I did it. Once people saw me in that, they seemed to accept me more. Kids I'd only observed from afar would come up to me and say hello. I mean, people recognized and knew me at my schools in the past, but the difference was that at Brooks, there was a tone of respect when classmates called my name.
Like Ritika, Brooks has also helped me explore and develop passions. Advocacy work is more than just a hobby of mine, it's a significant daily part of my life at home. Specifically, combating ableism, which is discrimination against people who experiences developmental differences or any other kind of physical difference. The reason it's such a big part of my life is because I've grown up watching my older brother fall prey to the ignorance and discrimination of others, who look at him and see only the face of Down syndrome, not a capable young man who deserves respect. The first distinct memory I have of witnessing discrimination is in 6th grade. It was late spring, the first day after the last day of school. Forrest had just graduated the 8th grade, and he, Mom, and I were visiting a potential high school. As we concluded the tour, Forrest asked to see the music room. He loves music and actually taught himself to play piano. When we got to the room, the band teacher looked at him, and without even hearing what he could play, said with certainty, he could never be in the band. Anger and disappointment rose in a wave from the pit of my stomach as I recognized prejudice for the first time. But I stood in paralyzed silence. I didn't know how to speak up. I didn't know what to say. Brooks has helped develop my voice. Through programs like SDLC and by observing the patient and dedicated leadership of many adults here on campus, I gradually became more confident and even hosted a workshop at Unity Day last year trying to explain ableism.
I hadn't learned about social justice until Brooks. I didn't even know what the word homosexual meant until 7th or 8th grade. Since I've gone to private school for so long, I've lived a very sheltered life. It was only when in high school that I became more aware of injustices in society, such as racism. Even though I kept hearing about racism, I never thought it would happen to me. Unfortunately, it did, at my own house this past December. My dad is the coach of my brother's Lego robotics team. Every Saturday, 3 or 4 other kids would come to our house to work on their latest robot. One night, after one of these meetings, a police officer knocked on the door. She said that one of our neighbors felt unsafe because of the cars in our driveway, and that they thought there was suspicious activity happening in the house. We had lived in our yellow house for 13 years, and we thought we were settled. We thought we wouldn't face judgment in our own house. We were wrong. Until that humiliating moment, I could only feel sympathetic to those oppressed. I didn't truly understand how unfair and silencing it felt to be targeted in the place where I grew up. Well, in a matter of 10 minutes, I knew. And I learned that just trying to be a good person wasn't enough for everyone. Not everyone could like me, which was really difficult to learn after having hurt so many people in the past with my self-centered attitude. I tried for years to be a people pleaser, and at that moment, I learned I couldn't please everyone.
I think we all know it can be pretty challenging to please parents. While at Brooks, I've been acutely aware and felt extremely guilty about not doing well academically, well being straight A's. My mom got straight A's in high school despite living on the brink of poverty and working at the same time. So while at Brooks, when I didn't perform to that standard of excellence, which was and is most of the time, I feel guilty, like I'm squandering an opportunity that I know other people would jump at. If I hang out with friends on a Sunday instead of studying, I feel guilty if my grades reflect that missed studying opportunity. I've had moments where I feel like my work and social life are balanced, but I'm really still working to find that balance.
Because I had been surrounded by driven kids all my life, I was able to put work first and social life second pretty easily. I'd been a perfectionist since preschool, and I still am to this day, but I was that control freak who needed a say in every part of every project and presentation. I needed straight A's because they had been my parents' standard my whole life. I continued in this fashion during freshman year and was ready to do it all again sophomore year. That is, until I auditioned for the fall play, Columbinus. I knew I loved the spotlight and being the center of attention. I suspect my brutally honest phase in elementary school stemmed from me just wanting more attention. Anyway, I wasn't even going to audition because I'd been cut from the show the year before, so what was the point? My new and third advisor, Mr. Lazare, managed to convince me to audition, and I am forever indebted to him for that. In terms of the actual show, I got a part and had incredibly close relationships with my fellow actors. Columbinus, along with the 6 other Brooks shows I was in, taught me how to truly trust my peers and how to let them do what they do in order to make the show better. Theater taught me to let go, and I've been trying to in every aspect of my life. Yes, I still have that perfectionist quality, but I started finding a balance between work and play, and finally got out to meet more people. And I think that's when Rowan and I really, truly met.
I got to really know Ritika when we both performed in Into the Woods last year. After being constantly badgered by the likes of Kate Packard, Hannah Maver, Max Curry, and Mr. Griffith, I finally broke junior year and opted to do the musical instead of sports. I'm glad that I did. It reopened doors to a neglected passion of mine and offered a tremendous opportunity to get to know people beyond passing surface impressions that one might get in the classroom. Keeping the lesson I learned from Seyon in mind, I tried to embrace the differences around me. And Ritika was one of those differences. Both in the musical and in Kano's A-Push class, Ritika and I connected as ambitious people driven to succeed. I've loved her sense of humor since freshman stand-up. And throughout the musical season, I grew to admire her grace, intelligence, and most of all, her seemingly endless capacity for genuine compassion.
I let myself not take classes as seriously as before so I could focus on theater and being social, and so I hung out with the cast more. In Into the Woods, I didn't have a very time-consuming part. So that was even more of an opportunity for me to make deeper connections with people. While doing so, I learned about Rowan's witty jokes, his immense talent in both the arts and athletics, and his ability to be a great advisor in tough situations. We've both been involved in very different areas of the arts since we were little.
I had my circus arts background as well as experience with opera and choral music.
I jumped around different drama and improv groups at school and learned piano and guitar.
So it seems impossible that Ritika and I could meet at a similar point. But this year we both ended up in rock band together while continuing our other interests on the side. I continue my classical training with Mr. Griffith.
And I continued my guitar lessons with Mr. Shudo.
And then senior year, we somehow managed to get tangled up in being school prefects.
Mr. Packard told us that he chose each of us because we represented different parts of Brooks.
Our differences make each meeting full of varying opinions and lively discussions, yet somehow, from the very first meeting, we talked and laughed with each other like old friends. And as long as we're not smirking, we can usually end up on Mr. Packard's good side.
We each bring something unique to the group, whether it be Hannah's calm demeanor, Gabby's diffusing humor, or Coco. Just Coco.
My mom has reminded me every year of one lesson I found very helpful. Your friends and who you spend time with reflect who you are and where your values lie. The key thing I've taken from this is that when you meet someone who you admire, for whatever reason, try to spend time with them. I admire Ritika, and although we grew up in different places with vastly different families, we both love many of the same things. In part, Ritika and I have connected so well because our differences complement each other's personalities. And even though I know we're headed in completely different directions after Brooks, I want to study international relations.
And I, medicine.
Brooks has been a crossroad of similarities for us.
Even though we started in completely different places, we met up and participated in similar activities,
Attended similar events.
and rose to similar positions.
And although it looks like we did a lot of the same things from the outside, we each added our own flair.
Our backgrounds influenced us a lot in what we did. My love of organization and order,
And my ability to cope with instability and change gave each of us unique perspectives on our shared experiences.
that's what's so incredible about Brooks. Kids from all backgrounds with drastically different stories can come together and share the common joys in life, whether it be receiving a standing ovation on stage, or taking the winning shot, or staging a ride in front of Mr. Packard's house after the Super Bowl.
But we can only do this if we keep an open mind about the people that we meet. Everyone has the potential to contribute something unique and important, and every person you meet is worthy of basic dignity. Even more importantly, you don't know everyone's story. Whether it's that someone called the cops on them for no reason.
Or that their house literally burned down.
Ritika and I would never have met if we weren't willing to take a risk and open ourselves to the unknown. During your Brooks careers, please try to do that too. Your individuality is what makes Brooks so special. We need the louder and the quieter.
The imaginative and the realistic.
The athlete.
The artist and the student to create the memories of Brooks that we cherish.
And I am so, so grateful that I have had the Ritika beside me
And the Rowan beside me.
to make this speech
One of those memories. Thank you.